to participate in the Alumni Reunion Weekend. This is my first year. I just finished my first full year here teaching at Pitzer. So I'm a newbie. But this morning, my objective is to share with you a glimpse into my artistic practice and to describe what I believe is an incredibly important turning point in this practice. As a visual artist, obviously I'm beholden to images to make my case. However, I'm also going to do this through the use of a mathematical metaphor. And my intention here is not to focus solely on my own practice, but to use it as an example of an approach and as a way of thinking about collaboration that can be extrapolated to larger institutional systems or cultural paradigms. I would like to thank Professor Judy Grabner, who belongs to the math field group, for her assistance in developing some of the ideas for this presentation. She has been an important friend and colleague since I've gotten here. So in mathematics, a tangent is a straight line that extends from a point along a curve, usually a circle. Imagine that you are following a circle and that your progression is smooth, regular, and constant. At every point, you are acted upon by a force, which pulls you inward towards the center of the circle. As you continue to trace your circle, you are suddenly pulled by an outside force, which causes you to leave your circle. Now free from uniform circular motion, you embark on another path. We call this going off on a tangent. So in my studio practice, I'm trying to recognize the outside forces where they exist, wherever they come from, so that I can diverge from my original motive or course and take some of those tangents instead. I wanted to talk today a little bit about my pedagogy. And like my studio practice, my pedagogy is predicated upon the belief that mature, sophisticated, and socially relevant artwork comes from an ability to integrate and synthesize knowledge across a wide frame of references, as well as collaborate in a variety of ways to make the most out of this knowledge. So for the purpose of this discussion, I would like for you to consider the act of collaborating, whether common or infrequent, as tangential, in that it's a divergence from a single individual's typical studio practice. And today I'm going to focus on a specific type of collaboration that I will refer to as parallel tangents. So imagine now that the studio practice of two individuals is described as the movement around two separate circles, and that each person's practice heads off on a tangent from these circles, and that these two tangents are actually parallel to one another. These tangents describe the collaboration between the two individuals whose separate deviations from his or her normal practice move each of them in the same direction. My parallel tangent, although I'm not sure she likes to be referred to that, is the sculptor and graphic designer Rebecca Myers. While we have worked alongside each other for almost 10 years, it's only within the last 3 years that we've hit this kind of turning point, and our objectives have aligned themselves in such a way that we've left our normal daily practice and gone off on tangents side by side together in the same direction. So while this collaboration is not the only type of collaboration we've been involved with, it is the most significant in that it has affected the direction and success of our work. I'd like to distinguish a little. I think collaborating with someone as a full-time occupation is a very different than working with someone on something that's specific or self-contained. We work together on a daily basis in the studio. And although there are a variety of reasons for working with other craftspeople or other industries, Rebecca and I tend to only collaborate with other people on self-contained projects where we lack the material or the technical proficiency to accomplish a task the way we think it needs to be done. So at times when we do face a project that needs such technical proficiency, we have to hand over it to a manufacturer, in this case a fiberglass manufacturer who helped us fabricate these chipwiches that you see on the left. So I made the original prototypes out of MDF and then delivered them to this manufacturer who made fiberglass molds, cast the parts, and then painted the parts to our specifications. So in this case, we're working with someone else, but that person doesn't really make any decisions that truly influence the final outcome or final product of the project. However, we also work with people at times who have input into the design or the content of the work. So in this case, we wanted to create a wooden chest for a collection of ceramic bones that were lustered gold that are actually modeled off of a 1/64th scale museum quality Tyrannosaurus Rex replica. So we made all these bones, and then we worked with a woodworker in Colorado to design something that would fit our needs as a case for these precious and rare bones. Now, his expertise was really invaluable, not only for the fabrication of this, which is not something we could have done, but also in determining how this chest could reinforce our ideas of a modern spin on this kind of classic natural history display. So either type of this collaboration can be imagined as a third line, parallel to our own, yet transient. So it comes and goes. So I worked up this presentation in collaboration with Rebecca, and you can see her handiwork in the animations. But we discussed these ideas and how this back and forth exchange of ideas operates and the implications of our specific form of collaboration we thought would be best explained through a discussion of three distinct components. The methods of each component, we believe, may be directly or indirectly applied to a wide range of collaborative forms. And these components are first, criteria, second, correlations, and thirdly, convergence. So this is part one, criteria. When Rebecca and I first began working, I'm sorry, this slide's a little bit dark, but when Rebecca and I first began working together, I was creating these large, life-size emperor penguins out of clay for an installation and a solo exhibition called Hope Springs Eternal. And it was important for me to create a really slick, flawless surface on these ceramic pieces so that people would be attracted to them. And there would be a kind of sense of empathy involved in interacting with them and seeing them trapped on this shrinking iceberg. So I decided one way of making this surface slick and flawless would be to have them painted at an auto body shop with a urethane finish rather than glazing them, which is inherently kind of filled with potentials for flaws. So at first, in talking about this project, I had to convince Rebecca that despite the extra cost of having these painted, that it would be worthwhile because it would give us control over the final product, or at least more control over the final product. And then after discussing potential color options, she explained that the pale pink was the right color because it emphasizes these creatures' vulnerability, which is obviously a critical part of the content of this piece. So both she and I had ideas about what we thought was right, but before we could proceed, we were forced to confer with each other and articulate these notions. And this process, it slows the whole decision-making process down because it forces us to explain as fully as possible our own perspectives so that we can make an informed decision together. And whether one person's ideas are intuitive or not, he or she is always asked to explain why his or her idea may be more compelling than the other person's, at times having to argue this point vehemently. But as a result, our decision-making process has become much more deliberate and much more critical. And this process is something that's really familiar to us, having been educated in a system that relies heavily upon a critique structure. It's not really something new, but it's something more involved because there's two people doing it. So this is, again, a strategy that I employ in the classroom, both at the beginning, middle, and end of a project. Often I'll assign a project, and the first thing my class does is discuss everyone's individual ideas. This gives the entire class the opportunity to provide feedback from the get-go. And often we'll do an in-process critique or a final critique is mandatory, really. And in many cases, I believe this fosters a really positive relationship within the class, and it leads to a stronger end result because everyone's involved from the very beginning. I think this strategy works well as long as the students understand that the emphasis isn't really on individual success, but that any individual success can be something that's shared by the entire group. So part 2 is correlations. An important benefit of working with Rebecca has been our ability to expose new possibilities by changing our point of reference. So once we agree upon a course of action, we usually divide up the workload. At times, this means we work on the same project simultaneously because we can accomplish the task more quickly or because we both enjoy the process. At other times, each person takes it upon themselves to do some specific part of the task that the other person can't accomplish or does not wish to accomplish. But most importantly, dividing up the workload allows one person a fresh perspective from which to join the project at any point. So for example, when we created this installation, a kind of diorama of the extinction of the dinosaurs entitled Between a Rock, I decided that the meteorite, which you can see at the top in the background, would be best created through carving down styrofoam and then coating it with silicon carbide. However, as I was carving the styrofoam, I was having trouble translating my drawings into this three-dimensional form. So I asked Rebecca to look at it and talk to her a little bit about what might have been wrong with my approach. And rather than articulating what was going wrong with it, she just picked up the tools and started kind of aggressively carving away at it, which made me realize how conservative I was being in my approach to carving this thing. Styrofoam is expensive, you realize. But then we were able to work on it together and finish carving this meteorite in a way that suited us both. And again, I think this is a process that's duplicated in the classroom on a regular basis. You know, during open studio work days, students are making progress on their projects, and I come around discussing where they're going, what they're doing, other approaches that they might take to improve their final product. And in some cases, when I can't quite articulate what it is I'm talking about, I can physically manipulate the material or pick up what they're working on and change it so that they can see right there in a hands-on fashion how to do it themselves. So the fresh vantage point that one of us can add to a project at any given point allows us to reevaluate our actions or their results. Most importantly, it allows us to negotiate all the different problems that come up more efficiently and gets us out of our individual patterns of circular thinking. The result, we hope, of working in this way is that a stronger correlation emerges between our objectives, which I'm going to talk a little bit about in the next section, which is part 3 is convergence. So as Rebecca and my collaboration has evolved over the past 3 years, we've been challenged to kind of revise our sense of ownership of this shared work. We believe that our collaboration, if it's going to be successful, we have to be open to each other's ideas and solutions, but we also have to be able to control our individual inclination towards self-importance, our egos, in other words. So this doesn't necessarily mean that we suppress who we are in the process, but we have to trust that the strength of our work is not a result of our individual genius, as is the commonplace art historical trope. So having another person's hand in every aspect of the work you make, from the look and the feel to the content and intent, is not something that's always very comfortable. I think I have learned, in particular, the importance of acquiescing, removing myself from the equation in order to yield a stronger outcome. And I think it becomes a kind of delicate balancing act, because it's tempting also to remove yourself so that you can avoid making difficult decisions, which I think has to be avoided as much as possible, because it's important that everybody be involved in those difficult decisions. So it's important to acquiesce in an appropriate way, but it's also, you have to have the right kind of spirit, a spirit of generosity to the way that you acquiesce. And learning to do this hasn't been easy, but I think making the type of work we make has helped in that we're not fixed to any specific set of techniques. So we make work that comments on humankind's insatiable appetites for consuming, which I think was probably most evident in that first piece you saw of the chip witches being consumed. We're also interested in the implications or consequences of that consumption. And this commentary manifests itself, I think, most readily and most tangibly in the form of these souvenirs that we make of our exhibitions. And although it's kind of a subversive exchange that takes place when someone decides to purchase a souvenir, it's also kind of charming because people are really genuinely happy to take away a memento of an exhibition as a reminder of the experience and as something that's an accessible work of art. And although we're not giving away our work like someone like Felix Torres, maybe someone like that, it is important to us that it remain affordable. And in this respect, I feel like we're acquiescing not only to the interests of our audience, but also to the content of our work. So in the work I've shown you, the objectives of Rebecca and I, they converge. If you were to see this work for the first time with no explanation, you might assume that there is only one author, because the viewer experiences our work at its very limit, at the point where these parallel lines converge. So, striving to find the limits of Rebecca and my practice, where our individual objectives come together, is one force that projects us forward into the unknown. But beginning to work together has been a really crucial turning point for us, and is hopefully an example of the type of success that can be achieved through a close and thoughtful collaboration. Now, as I mentioned, this is the end of my first year here at Pitzer, and I have to say I was attracted to coming to Pitzer to work and to teach because I believe it's propelled forward by some similar forces, whether it's school governance, opportunities in the classroom, or belonging to a consortium of colleges. I think Pitzer sets an important example of the ways in which working together we can achieve a similar objective, and that this can have incredible benefits not only to us as individuals, but to the entire community. So I look forward to continuing to be a part of that collaboration and hopefully discussing some of the ways that this collaboration can influence positive results in our larger nation and global economy and culture. Thank you.